PAHO WHO is committed to support Barbados in this transformation. They are building a model of care that prioritizes accessibility, respects human rights, and tackles a stigma head-on in a world where mental health needs are increasing and responses are insufficient. Only last year, member states of PAHO approved a resolution on mental health. Barbados is a good example of accelerated action to advance the mental health agenda. We commend Barbados for its foresight in prioritizing mental health.
Barbados is charting a new course, where mental health is a priority and every person has the right to access care without stigma or discrimination.
Anyone can face mental health challenges at some point in their lives. Fortunately, Barbados has made remarkable strides in transforming mental health services.
With legislation and policy updates, mental health care is more accessible, inclusive, and community-centered.
Persons can access all healthcare services, including mental health, at all our polyclinics.
For years, I struggled in silence, unsure where to turn. But with the services available at my local polyclinic and the support of family and friends, I feel seen, heard, and empowered to live my best life.
Mental health management must also be considered when caring for expectant mothers. At our polyclinics, we're integrating mental health into maternal and child health services by training our nurses to use the Mental Health Gap Action Program Intervention Guide. It helps to build their capacity to identify and address mental health problems in parents in the perinatal period. We hope to positively impact the mental health of parents, their children, and by extension, our nation.
Children and adolescents can also be affected by mental health conditions, and they should feel assured that mental health services are available.
Introducing mental health literacy programs in our schools is very important. We need to know it's okay to talk about our feelings. This will help us to learn how to support each other and to seek help when we need it.
Establishing the mental health hotline, Lifeline Barbados, has been a game changer. With trained operators and clear protocols, we're providing a lifeline to those in crisis, ensuring that they know help is just a call away.
Mental health is a cornerstone of our health agenda. By integrating mental health services into primary care and concomitantly expanding community-level resources, we are breaking barriers and ensuring that no one is left behind, because good mental health is a right for everyone, everywhere.
PAHO WHO is committed to support Barbados in this transformation. They are building a model of care that prioritizes accessibility, respects human rights, and tackles a stigma head-on in a world where mental health needs are increasing and responses are insufficient. Only last year, member states of PAHO approved a resolution on mental health. Barbados is a good example of accelerated action to advance the mental health agenda. We commend Barbados for its foresight in prioritizing mental health.
With updated policies, expanded services, and empowered communities, Barbados is proving that mental health truly matters. Together, we're creating a future where everyone can thrive. Barbados is charting a new course, where mental health is a priority and every person has the right to access care without stigma or discrimination.
Anyone can face mental health challenges at some point in their lives. Fortunately, Barbados has made remarkable strides in transforming mental health services.
With legislation and policy updates, mental health care is more accessible, inclusive, and community-centered.
Persons can access all healthcare services, including mental health, at all our polyclinics.
With updated policies, expanded services, and empowered communities, Barbados is proving that mental health truly matters. Together, we're creating a future where everyone can thrive.
Mental health management must also be considered when caring for expectant mothers. At our polyclinics, we're integrating mental health into maternal and child health services by training our nurses to use the Mental Health Gap Action Program Intervention Guide. It helps to build their capacity to identify and address mental health problems in parents in the perinatal period. We hope to positively impact the mental health of parents, their children, and by extension, our nation.
For years, I struggled in silence, unsure where to turn. But with the services available at my local polyclinic and the support of family and friends, I feel seen, heard, and empowered to live my best life.
Children and adolescents can also be affected by mental health conditions, and they should feel assured that mental health services are available.
Introducing mental health literacy programs in our schools is very important. We need to know it's okay to talk about our feelings. This will help us to learn how to support each other and to seek help when we need it.
Mental health is a cornerstone of our health agenda. By integrating mental health services into primary care and concomitantly expanding community-level resources, we are breaking barriers and ensuring that no one is left behind, because good mental health is a right for everyone, everywhere.
PAHO WHO is committed to support Barbados in this transformation. They are building a model of care that prioritizes accessibility, respects human rights, and tackles a stigma head-on in a world where mental health needs are increasing and responses are insufficient. Only last year, member states of PAHO approved a resolution on mental health. Barbados is a good example of accelerated action to advance the mental health agenda. We commend Barbados for its foresight in prioritizing mental health.
Barbados is charting a new course where mental health is a priority and every person has the right to access care without stigma or discrimination.
Anyone can face mental health challenges at some point in their lives. Fortunately, Barbados has made remarkable strides in transforming mental health services.
With legislation and policy updates, mental health care is more accessible, inclusive, and community-centered.
Persons can access all healthcare services, including mental health, at all our polyclinics.
For years, I struggled in silence, unsure where to turn. But with the services available at my local polyclinic and the support of family and friends, I feel seen, heard, and empowered to live my best life.
Mental health management must also be considered when caring for expectant mothers. At our polyclinics, we're integrating mental health into maternal and child health services by training our nurses to use the Mental Health Gap Action Program Intervention Guide. It helps to build their capacity to identify and address mental health problems in parents in the perinatal period. We hope to positively impact the mental health of parents, their children, and by extension, our nation.
Children and adolescents can also be affected by mental health conditions, and they should feel assured that mental health services are available.
Introducing mental health literacy programs in our schools is very important. We need to know it's okay to talk about our feelings. This will help us to learn how to support each other and to seek help when we need it.
Establishing the mental health hotline, Lifeline Barbados, has been a game changer. With trained operators and clear protocols, we're providing a lifeline to those in crisis, ensuring that they know help is just a call away.
Mental health is a cornerstone of our health agenda. By integrating mental health services into primary care and concomitantly expanded community-level resources, we are breaking barriers and ensuring that no one is left behind. Because good mental health is a right for everyone, everywhere.
PAHO WHO is committed to support Barbados in this transformation. They are building a model of care that prioritizes accessibility, respects human rights, and tackles a stigma head-on in a world where mental health needs are increasing and responses are insufficient. Only last year, member states of PAHO approved a resolution on mental health. Barbados is a good example of accelerated action to advance the mental health agenda. We commend Barbados for its foresight in prioritizing mental health.
With updated policies, expanded services, and
And
empowered
everyone,
communities, Barbados is
before we get
proving that
started
mental health
officially, I would
truly
just
matters.
like you to
Together,
come
we're
forward
creating a
because
future
this
where-
is going to be recorded and is being streamed as well. And we don't want to have a huge set of empty seats. So if you don't mind, if you can just come forward and fill the seats to the front, please. Thank you. You can stay on the side you're at, but if you can just come forward and fill the first 2 rows. Please, please, pretty please. Just come forward and fill up the first 2 rows, please. We just want to, thank you so much. Just come forward and fill up the rows. Yes, you can come to the front. Come forward. All right. And now that I have you settled, I'll ask you to please stand for the national anthem. Please be seated.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Ade, and I want to share a little bit about my life with everyone here today and everyone that's watching on the stream. I had great difficulties in school in terms of settling in, fitting in, following regulations, being a part of the structure. I always did well because naturally, but I always had difficulties in school. And there was a period of time where I would speak to the guidance counselor for 10 minutes every morning before class for her to help settle me, and then I would be able to go to them. And so that rolled into, but I never had, at one point the school had sent me for an assessment, and At that point in my life, I was very talented at hiding the difficulties that I was having. And it's a skill that I worked on and developed over many years. And I continued after school and through my 20s. So I kind of developed naming for specific things that I was feeling. I had something I called the brain fog, which I now know was periods of depression. And then also I would have to have periods of isolation where I would have to shut myself away from socializing with people to kind of detox from interaction. In my early 30s, I was having these continued difficulties, and they started to exacerbate. I was having difficulty maintaining my regular schedule, getting up, going to work, and I spoke to a friend of mine who was a doctor, and she spoke to the nurse at the Edgar Cochrane Clinic, and she said that I should come in and speak to her. I went in and spoke to the nurse, and the mental health clinic system that is set up by the Ministry of Health that works through the polyclinics rotates from clinic to clinic. So the day that I went to speak to the nurse, there wasn't a mental health clinic day that day, so I made an appointment. And I went back and I spoke to Dr. Brathwaite Drummond for an extended period of time. I kind of explained everything that was going on with me. For the first time in my life, I was completely open and honest about all the difficulties that I was facing. And we had several more appointments where we went through all the things I was feeling, the way I was dealing with my life, with the difficulties I was facing. And eventually we arrived at a diagnosis, bipolar disorder. But I was very against taking medication. I've never liked taking pills. She said to me, take 1/4 of what we prescribe as the lowest dose and try it. And I did. I went back to see her the following week. I could feel a significant difference in how I was able to regulate my negative emotions. Difficulties in terms of mental health illness is a matter of brain chemistry, and there are drugs that can assist you with that. That was 12 years ago, and through those intervening years, I've continued therapy by going to the Edgar Cochrane Clinic. I'm down to every 6 weeks now, where I was going once every week, every 2 weeks. I've got things stable. I'm managing my processes. I've realized things about myself. I need structure, a schedule. I schedule everything. I have friends that tell me, yeah, but you should leave some space for spontaneity. I'm like, all right, I'll schedule some spontaneity. I did that yesterday. I woke up in the morning. I was like, part of my ongoing journey is body maintenance. Because if you've ever been through a period of clinical depression, you know that it hurts. It physically hurts. Like your body aches. And part of my maintenance for my mental health is maintaining my body as well. Right now, I work a lot, and I usually do like an hour of stretching after work each day. Yesterday morning, I got up and I was spontaneous. I went online, I found a yoga class, I signed up, I paid, and I left home immediately and went to a beginner's class that started in 45 minutes, and I got there. But that is one of the things that I've come to call my pillars of wellness. Eating well, drinking water, getting sunshine, exercise, some socialization, spending time with my children, spending time outside in nature. I like to go to the beach. So I was able to, with the help of a mental health professional, Dr. Brathwaite, as well as the nurses that work as part of her team, put together my own process, my own structure of how I'm going to maintain my health, my mental health. And it's a thing that everyone should think about, whether you have a diagnosis or not. Your mental health is an important part of your well-being, and being conscious about it, thinking about it, and thinking in terms of maintenance, in terms of how do I deal with setbacks, how do I deal with difficult moments. I've improved my resiliency significantly over the last 10 years or so. Once upon a time, something negative would happen, a negative circumstance, someone would say something negative, and it would knock me completely off kilter. It would take me a couple of days to recover, and I'd usually be isolating. And that kind of threw off the living of my life in terms of working, in terms of interacting with family and friends that need to withdraw, to isolate. And so I've just been through a very difficult last 3 years. I was ill physically. I went through a period of depression that was long, and I felt like it was not going to have an end. I threw it all. I've kind of built a team around me of friends. I've been my support network. I choose you, I choose you, I choose you. You are the people that I trust, the people that I believe will support me in times when I'm going through difficult times. And champions. I've nominated, I've elevated some of my friends from the term friend to champion because they've been so strong for me during my difficult times. Right now, I'm in a period of time where I'm feeling very stable. I wake up every day, I go to work, I enjoy my structure, I schedule things, I still try to do a little spontaneity. I feel like things are working well. I take my medication, I go to my regular visits at the clinic, and through that time, in these last couple of years that have been very difficult, the support network, beyond just my people that are friends, the people at the clinic, the extended group of the Ministry of Health, because sometimes you do need, just beyond your clinic, additional assistance. And in those times when I've needed additional assistance, I've been able to go to any polyclinic or the hospital in Blackrock, and it's just kind of been smooth. I want to read one piece of poetry that I wrote recently when I was going through a very dark time. It's called A Curiously Positive Take. Take heed of the minutiae, the trivial summons joy. Laughing till tears lubricate your chasms of sorrow, tripping but falling unharmed, the gleeful giggles of babes, a liberated blossom, falling to bless you with its doomed beauty. Entropy is undefeated. The long, slow march constricts its end. Conscientious objection holds no sway. Delay as you wish, and dear friend, you must delay. It is inevitable, the script is written, but you direct the motion picture. Thus we must strive for a life unfettered by fears of supernovas, tsunami sirens, unforeseen hatters, angry fools on bad mind merchants. Support the friend in need. Embrace each friend with deed. Cherish cool breezes, the sand underfoot and between toes, a lover's coy glance, a lingering embrace, wordlessly communicating. The heat death of the universe is guaranteed. Tomorrow is no contract. But play like it is. Love like it is limitless. All are deserving a kind word, a warm smile, genuine goodness. Genuine goodness is a force, not fundamental but essential. While we cannot make the sun stand still, we can race him to a dead heat. Thank you for listening.
The Honorable Davidson Ishmael, Minister of State, Ministry of Health and Wellness. Dr. the Most Honorable Kenneth George, Chief Medical Officer. Mr. Wayne Marshall, Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Health and Wellness. Dr. Arthur Phillips, Deputy Chief Medical Officer. Mrs. Anastasia Jordan, Chief Nursing Officer. Dr. Taraline Malcolm, Acting PAHO, WHO Representative. Dr. Maisha Emmanuel, Chairman of the National Mental Health Commission, other members of the National Mental Health Commission, senior officers of the Ministry of Health and Wellness, other specially invited guests, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. We gather today as a community, united by a shared commitment to mental health and well-being. Each person in this room brings their own story, their own experiences, and their own hopes for a future where mental health support is accessible, compassionate, and effective. Mental health touches every family, every workplace, every neighborhood. It affects people of all ages, backgrounds, and walks of life. For too long, conversations about mental health have been whispered in shadows, burdened by stigma and misunderstanding. Today, we step into the light together. Let us remember that behind every policy proposal is a human face, a lived experience, and a hope for better days ahead. The legislation we're going to be discussing is not just about policies and procedures, it's about people. It's about the teenager struggling with anxiety, the parent managing depression, the elderly person facing isolation, and the healthcare worker seeking support. It is about all of us because mental health is health. As we begin these conversations, we approach them with courage to speak our truths, compassion to listen deeply, and wisdom to recognize that our diversity of experiences strengthens our collective understanding. Let us begin with open hearts and minds, ready to listen, learn, and work together toward a future where mental health support is a right and not a privilege. The people in this room, service users, families, healthcare providers, advocates, and community members represent the heart of our mental health system. Your participation today is not just welcome, it is essential. The legislation we shape together will reflect the values we hold dear: dignity, respect, accessibility, and the fundamental belief that everyone deserves the opportunity to thrive. Together, we have the power to create change that honors the complexity of mental health challenges while building bridges to hope, healing, and recovery. You being here is important. Your voice matters. At this time, I would like to introduce you to the National Mental Health Commission panelists. The chairman, senior lecturer, University of the West Indies, consultant psychiatrist, Queen Elizabeth Hospital, Dr. Maisha Emmanuel. Our deputy chairman, is Dr. Joy Su. She's a consultant psychiatrist at the community-based psychiatric hospital. Dr. Su, I'm going to get it right. Dr. Brian McLachlan, he's a senior consultant psychiatrist at the psychiatric hospital. Dr. Elizabeth Rochester, who's a consultant psychiatrist, and Dr. Sherry Ann Catwell, who's a consultant psychiatrist at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. I just want to give you the names of the other members of the commission Mr. Shamar Linton, who's a counseling psychologist, Ms. Kay Belgrave, who's a teacher at the Harrison College, Ms. Lizelle Daisley, she's the general manager, directors of the SAVE Foundation, Mr. Winston Holder, who's superintendent with the Barbados Police Service, Renee Holder McLean Ramirez, who's a mental health advocate, Mrs. Tessa Chatterton Shaw, University of the West Indies substance abuse lecturer and mental health advocate, Mr. Michael Koyman, who is an attorney, Mrs. Michelle Webb-Burt, who's a social worker at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, Major Brenda Greenidge, with the Salvation Army Divisional Commander, the Chief Medical Officer, the Most Honorable Dr. Kenneth George, and the Deputy Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Arthur Phillips, and Mr. David Leacock, who's the hospital Anastasia? Okay, I know. Mr. David Leacock, and the Senior Consultant Psychiatrist, as I mentioned, Dr. McCracken. So please give them a round of applause. At this time, I'm going to hand over to the chairman, Dr. Maisha Emmanuel, who is going to give the presentation on the draft mental health legislative notes, and she'll be giving a PowerPoint presentation.
Thank you very much, and good evening, everybody. It's really a pleasure to be here. It has been quite a journey getting to this point, and we're in the commission, we're, shall I say, ecstatic that we've gotten to this point. It's been years and years of, iterations to get to here. So thank you again for coming. Okay, so what I'm going to do, because we've given this presentation before and we've talked for about 2 hours, but clearly nobody wants to hear all of that in one. So I've pared it down to half an hour and given you the opportunity for us to have a conversation about what I'm going to present today on behalf of the Commission. So in starting this process, I'm going to take you through how we started and what we did and how we got to where we are right now. And we began by first looking, of course, of the structure of the mental health services in Barbados. So very briefly, we all know there's the psychiatric hospital with over 500 beds, weekly clinics, a number of services there for children and adolescents, psychology, forensics, drug rehab, and the Thrive Family Center for Children and Adolescents. There's also the 12-bed QEH unit where I work, and we offer weekly clinics there, and there's a lot of focus on consultation, liaison, psychiatry. And of course, there are 9 polyclinics and 2 satellite clinics that offer weekly mental health services, and there are private mental health practitioners. So just very briefly, that's what the mental health system in Barbados, an overview of it, that's what it looks like. So in looking at the Act and recognizing that we really needed to rewrite, not just revise. We needed a complete rewrite of our Mental Health Act, which was first written in 1985. Okay, so very, very old and lacking one of the main things we recognize, that mental health as a basic human right was not even mentioned in the old Act. And so we thought, this is way beyond needing a complete overhaul. We wanted to overhaul our Act so that they fell in line with WHO standards, as well as the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities in 2006. And so again, glaring parameters that were not covered in the old Act that we wanted to include there. We wanted to emphasize community mental health care and move away from admission as the way in which to manage patients. For a small population that Barbados has relatively, the fact that we have a psychiatric hospital with so many inpatients, it's way beyond what is now recognized as international standard. Okay, so 500 beds, way too many people in the inpatient setting. And so we wanted to move away from inpatient care into more community care, and that needed to be reflected in our laws. Obviously, part of that process was around public education and advocacy, and clearly what we're doing now is part of that public education, and so a lot of emphasis needed to be put on that. involving our critical stakeholders. So even before we wrote anything with the act or started to look at what we wanted to do, we had a number of stakeholder meetings, including persons with lived experiences, their families, people from various ministries who are in contact with youth. We had youth advocacy groups, professional groups, all to hear what people thought needed to be done. Because we did not want to go into a situation where we are saying, you know, we in the commission, we know what you want. That was never going to be the approach. And so we started there. Then we had our meetings around what we thought needed to go into the act. And then we went back to those same stakeholders and again presented what we did. And so this meeting tonight and the one that we're going to have in another 2 weeks is a continuation of that process that we have started. We actually started in September of 2023, this current commission. But remember, I was making the point that it's been many years in the making, because I remember when I was a member of a commission back in 2008, we had already started this process and got stalled for various reasons. And then COVID came and stalled that commission again. So we're very happy to be able to be at this point where we actually have something in writing that we can bring now to the public to hear your opinions on what we have written. And the last thing we also thought about was adjusting the investment in mental health, meaning that Barbados already spends about 10% of its health budget in mental health. And that's exactly where WHO recommends a country should be in terms of spending. But again, where we are spending it is what we need to adjust. To my earlier point about moving away from hospital into community care and making the emphasis be, how do I manage this person in the setting as close to home as possible, in their community as possible, and not think of, oh, this person needs to come into hospital to receive care. So that's a major push that we have addressed. Now, in looking at the current challenges, we recognize, especially coming out of COVID, that there was an increased need for care. We don't have local figures, but we know internationally there was an increase, about 25% increase in the numbers of persons accessing mental health services. And so, you know, we also recognize, if you remember in 2023, when we had a spate of persons dying by suicide, we recognize that part of the issue there was lack of access. Well, there were several things, but one of the things would be lack of access to care. And so we recognize that sometimes the lack of access included not knowing where help was available. So it's not just about, can I get to a psychiatrist or a psychologist or a mental health professional? It's more around, well, I don't know what to do. What is this thing that I'm feeling? You heard the young man spoke earlier about how he had to name what he was experiencing, and for a while he did not understand what was going on. And so a lot of that we found in our assessment around persons who were coming to us, delaying because they just did not recognize what was happening to them, right? We will always have resource constraints. Even countries that are so-called, you know, first world, yes, they have resource. In fact, so many times I have patients say to me, you know, we complain about our system here, but if we were to go to Canada, it takes 6 months, if I'm lucky, before I can get in to see my doctor to see a psychiatrist. Yeah, and England as well, Mr. Leacock is saying. So, you know, we cannot just say, well, we don't have money and we don't have this and we don't, we can focus on what we don't have, but there's a lot that we do have. We just need to reallocate our services. And I think that's where we wanted to focus, not so much on what the constraints were, which, as I said, would always be there. So I want to go through now. I hope you've been able to read through the Act on the website. And if not, you can go to it now at health.gov.bb as I go through it and follow along. There's Wi-Fi access here. Somebody can see if you can get onto it and see if you can follow Not very good? Okay. Okay. Right. So what I'll do, because it's a 32-page document and we can't do that in half an hour. So I picked out the things that we thought would be most relevant for the majority of people so that we can highlight some of the changes that are going to be happening with the new act. So we start first by defining what a mental illness is, and to make the point, it is as defined by international standards. DSM there just refers to the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. Basically, it's a way of classifying disorders. So what it is not, meaning mental illness is not an intellectual disability of itself. It is not if a person says, they are expressing a particular sexual preference or gender identity or sexual orientation. It is not that if the person is having sex with a lot of different people, or if they're, antisocial. And this is important because only on Sunday I was doing an interview about crime, and the person asked me about, what do you think about, basically asking what about all the crime that's happening now and mental illness. And I had to say, most crime is not committed by people with mental health problems. Substance use is the biggest risk factor. And so the fact that somebody is, robbing and, committing murder and all that, that does not mean that they have a mental health disorder. They may be angry, but we all get angry from time to time. We don't all go and kill people, right? So the point I'm making is, do not equate having an emotion with a diagnosis. And I find too many times people do that and say, oh, all these guys crazy, or make comments like that. These are not mental health problems. These are substance use problems for the most part, as well as all the other risk factors we know that predicts criminal behavior. Right. Case in point, just because you consume alcohol and other drugs, that does not mean that in itself means you have a mental illness. And everybody is presumed to have the ability to make decisions regarding their mental health care and treatment. Point being that, again, even if you are diagnosed with a mental health condition, it does not mean that you do not know or you do not have the capacity to make that decision about your mental health. And so this is something new that we have introduced, the supported decision making, where we are now saying when somebody has the capacity to decide, they can have an advance directive, which basically is a document describing the person's preferences regarding treatment. So I want this particular medication. Obviously, an advance directive is not for an emergency situation. You can't dictate what happens to you in an emergency, but outside of that, you can say, this is the way I want to be treated. This is the person whom I want to make those decisions for me. That's what a nominated representative is. Why this is important, so often we have people come into hospital who, whether it's because they are at high risk of suicide or they're in the middle of a psychotic episode and they're not able to make a decision for themselves, but then you find that the person who is making the decision for them haven't spoken to the person for the last 2 years, don't know very many things about them, but they're there because in the current act, your spouse comes first. So even if you and your spouse are separated, that means nothing in the act. Your spouse makes a decision. If your spouse is not available, then it's your parents, even if you and your parents have not spoken to each other. And after your parents, then it's your oldest child. And so it basically it doesn't give you an opportunity to choose whom you want. And so with a nominated representative, you get to choose upfront to say, this person is the person I would like to make decisions on my behalf when I cannot do so for myself. Okay? And there's a whole process set out in the act as to how this is how this happens, how this is allowed, meaning the person has to sign to say, yes, I agree, and so on. The other new thing we have introduced is the concept of enduring power of attorney. Again, this is applicable in the event that you lose capacity, and that is likely to be permanent. The most common thing is somebody who has dementia, who, as you know, there's no cure for dementia, but as you lose the capacity to decide for yourself, you're then not able to make medical and financial decisions, you have the opportunity there to, before all of that happens, assign somebody in that role. And you can have more than one person. Because you may think, well, you know, my husband is good at making medical decisions. When it comes to money, not so much. And I don't want him making those decisions for me. So you can have one person to make medical decisions for yourself, one person to make financial decisions, and one person to do any property transactions. Or you may choose to have one person to do everything. The point is, you get to choose. And so when we talk about autonomy and your right to choose, this is what we want to emphasize. People should be given that right to make a decision about what they want done to them when they have the ability to do that, and not just have, you know, what the next of kin says just because that person is quote unquote your next of kin, right? Specifically as it relates to rights of persons with mental illness, so there are a number of rights that we have outlined in the Act. The right to give and withhold consent, again, as long as you have the ability. You know, sometimes my colleagues would call us to say, this person needs to have a procedure done and they're refusing. Come and say if this person has the capacity. And if they do, then the person can leave. And that's a hard concept for a doctor, because we are trained to fix things and, you know, do it right. And, you know, if the person's sugar is 45, you need to get it down. But the thing is, if the person is capable of making a decision, even if you think it's ridiculous or it's dangerous to them, you have to let them make that decision. So they have a right to give and withhold consent, right? So that's something that we've specifically written in. You have a right to discontinue medication. Again, people think, but if you discontinue medication, you may relapse. Yes, but you understand that you may relapse, but it's your decision to make. Of course, with rights, there are consequences. So if you relapse and you have to come back into hospital, then that's a consequence, right? But the point is, as long as you have the capacity, you have that right. The right to confidentiality, again, is something that we try to drill into from medical students coming through. Being able to keep people's information confidential, and the casual conversation you may have on the corridor amongst yourselves, it's not appropriate. And so patients have, people being managed need to have that right to confidentiality. Access to care that we spoke about before, the least restrictive environment, again, that speaks to not being admitted into hospital if you can be managed safely as an outpatient, safely in the home context, or safely in the polyclinic system. And so the default will not be hospital care. Rights of non-discrimination in accessing physical health versus mental health care. Procedural accommodations basically refers to being able to have the person take part, say for example in a family meeting, and you need to speak in the manner that the person can understand. So, you know, I'm not going to talk about some, you know, a command auditory hallucinations, which is a technical term. You say what you mean, or you having the experience of hearing somebody talk to you, telling you to do something, and when you look around, you cannot see somebody. And that may seem like an obvious thing, but sometimes we get lost, meaning we as in mental health professionals, we don't recognize that we need to communicate in a manner that's appropriate for the person that you're speaking to. So there are lots of procedural accommodations that is your right, so you can demand that these things are present and that you have access. And then, of course, the access to your information and your medical records. And that's not something we practice a lot of in terms of, you know, when somebody says, I want to see what you've written about me. You know, as doctors, we get real nervous, like, we want that for, you know. So, but people have a right to see what you've written about. It is their information. We're writing it, but it's their information. And so we've written all of that into the Act to ensure that people are well aware of their rights. Very briefly here, duties of the providers, practice within your area of qualification. My colleague Janelle and I were just having this conversation that, you know, sometimes we see the negative fallout of people accessing mental health care from people who are not qualified. And the damage and the potential danger there especially when you're talking about somebody who may be at high risk of suicide or somebody who may be having an acute crisis, whether they're having psychosis or whatever it is that's going on. If you access care from someone who does not know how to recognize and manage the signs and symptoms, then you may end up with a worse off position. So we are holding people legally accountable. Not just that's unethical, it's now an illegal thing to practice outside of your area of expertise. And then we go on through some rights of the providers and the duties of government in terms of health promotion and prevention and provision of rehab services, halfway homes, and reduction of stigma and so on. This policy for deinstitutionalization speaks to what I was talking about earlier in terms of a policy around moving away from inpatient care to community care. Because we have lagged so far behind other countries, we have the opportunity to learn from their mistakes. Because oftentimes, for example, in the UK, when this was done, they closed all the hospitals with no real provision for patients. So what happened? The patients end up homeless or they ended up in prison, right? So we have an opportunity here to learn and not repeat those mistakes. So we have to make provisions. If people cannot go back to their home of origin, we cannot just close the hospital and say, well, carry on smartly, find a place to live, because that just moves the problem from one place to another place. And so we have to be mindful of what that policy is going to entail. Right, just because I'm aware of the time ticking along quickly, in terms of the types of admissions that we have, I think voluntary admission is quite straightforward, where you have the right to refuse or accept treatment and then discharge yourself from hospital. Facilitated admission, this is an involuntary admission in that this person, and usually the reason why we have to have somebody involuntarily admitted into hospital is around issues of safety, either safety to yourself, so the person is deemed high risk of suicide, or safety to other people because of the manner in which you are behaving. Usually it's around a psychotic episode. You are aggressive, you cannot keep yourself safe, and by extension, you cannot keep other people safe, and therefore the only safe decision is to have you in hospital where you can be managed there. That facilitated admission now requires, well, it already requires 2 independent assessments, but now we are stipulating one must be a psychiatrist, and the other person can either be a medical practitioner, a psychologist, a senior community mental health nurse, or nurse practitioner. So we are widening the scope. So it's not just going to be 2 doctors, you're going to widen the scope, the persons who could be part of that assessment, and it's going to be 30 days maximum. Right now it's 6 months with another 6-month ability to extend. Right now this new one will be 30 days, and if you want to extend it, you have to justify that to the tribunal. So we're going to again take away the doctor says this is what happens, and that's the end of it. You have to clearly say to the tribunal, these are the reasons why I think this person needs to continue to be in hospital. Again, put in limitations and put in oversight. So we need to check ourselves. And don't get me wrong, I don't think there's anyone among us who would have, Dr. McLaughlin, admitted somebody longer than they needed to. The point is we have to say why this is necessary and explain to the person, explain to their relative, explain to their nominated representative and the tribunal why this is necessary. I see the 10-minute, so I'm going to move along. Very important for children and adolescents, and we made a point of saying in this act, a person includes a child, except where we explain where the caveats are. Point being, children and adolescents have the same rights as adults. Obviously, if you're a minor, your guardian or your parent, that's the person who's responsible for you. But that does not mean that you do not have a say in what's happening. You still have the same rights as the adult, including access to care, being part of care decisions, asking questions, and receiving explanations that are age appropriate. So we want to hear the voice of children and young people coming through especially when they're under 18. Because it's very easy to say, oh, these children don't know what they want. That's not what we know, right? So we want to hear children, as I said, although their parents and guardians will decide for them, we want them to have a voice. And what is also different in this situation is that we are going to say that children also need to have two independent persons examine them to agree or not if they need to be admitted. Because we want to move away from, people come in to say, oh, this child is bad behaved, they need to be in hospital. No, you need two independent mental health professionals to assess them, and not just one person. In the Act, you would see if we've had to remove a child from home for whatever reason, then that person is admitted to a safe space, a place of safety, and that invariably means the hospital as step one, and then once Child Care Board and so on get involved, then they will determine what that safe space would be. And I think it's important that children know these things are available, because so often we have children who come to us and say, I am being abused in this way. The perpetrator is in the house, and they're afraid of saying anything because what is going to happen to me, and so we have to be able to say there are steps involved. You can be removed from the home to a safe place in hospital until we can work out what is happening and how best to proceed from there. Right, this one, the only thing I will highlight here is just to say we've now also introduced in a more formalized way, because we used to do this before and to some degree now, diversion at the point of arrest. So if someone is being charged or they've done something that is determined to be a minor offense, like shoplifting or something along those lines, instead of putting that person through the criminal justice system, if they're having a mental health crisis, they are diverted away from the criminal justice system and into mental health care. Note, this is only for minor offenses. You can't, stab somebody and say, oh, I'm having a mental health crisis and so I don't need to go to prison. That's not how this is going to work. Minor offenses only. And those are some more details for persons who have already been charged or people who are, sentenced and in prison, and again, behaving in a manner that indicates that they're having a mental health disorder. They are then required to be assessed by a mental health professional within a certain period of time, and a report made to the court within a certain period of time. So again, tightening up on the processes that are involved. And then the final couple of slides speaks to the Mental Health Commission, which should have an expanded role to what we are. So this current commission is advisory, but this one that we are proposing is that this will function as a regulatory body, setting standards for accreditation for facilities, maintaining a register of appropriate practitioners, inquiries if there's any death of a patient, collecting data, registering advance directive, and receiving complaints. So it's very much an expanded role of the commission. And then you heard me refer to the Mental Health Tribunal earlier, where you're going to have, it's like a court with 5 members. You have a judge or senior lawyer, 2 mental health professionals, nonprofit, somebody from a nonprofit organization, and a lay member. And this is where people can appeal. So if you're not happy with the fact that you're being admitted involuntarily, you can appeal there. If you think your rights have been violated in some way, you can appeal to the tribunal. If you are a nominated representative and you're questioning something that the care team is doing, you can appeal there. And so, again, oversight. And then this is the final one, I think. Persons running a mental health establishment without registration, or mental health professionals knowingly working in such an establishment, again, will be liable. And I think I spoke to that earlier, liable by fine and or imprisonment. In other words, we're taking it very seriously. In the same way, you would not expect someone like myself as a psychiatrist to go in and be doing heart surgery, clearly outside of my realm of expertise. We do not expect somebody without the requisite training and experience to be administering mental health care. And we're already seeing that in the outpatient setting, and so we need to have clear oversight of that and put an end to it, because we've seen where it has caused many problems for people. And this slide, I probably can't read it, but we can speak to it. It just compares the current act with the act. So explicit rights to consent, supported decision making, facilitated admissions, prohibiting seclusion, restraint only as a last resort, introduction of mental health diversion for minor offenses, tighter regulations, including prohibition in minors and ethical approvals. So very briefly, that was about half an hour, I think. Oh, 3 more minutes. Okay, okay. Thank you. So yeah, so we have introduced quite a number of new, what we hope will eventually become laws into the current act. As the idea is that we want people to be treated with dignity. We want people to feel free to access care within the community without fear of thinking, once you go and tell a psychiatrist something, you're going to go into the hospital because that's the only route available. That's not true, but we want to emphasize that, and we wanted to emphasize very much all your rights as a person who may be accessing care. And I'll leave it there. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Emmanuel, and Dr. Emmanuel and the other members of the commission, the panelists, Dr. Joy Sue, Dr. Brian McLachlan, Dr. Elizabeth Rochester, and Dr. Sherry Ann Catwell. They will be taking questions in just a bit. Before we get to that, I'd like to invite Stoned with Cupid. He will perform spoken word. If you see something, say something.
So, good evening, all you beautiful people. I'll be doing a peace session on men's mental health called If You See Something, Say Something. Sound guys, are you ready? They say when you see something, say something. I'm sure you've all heard that phrase before, right? When you see something, say something. But as men, sometimes to speak is to reveal too much. And as men, we don't like being naked. We don't want to undress the decades of damage and strip any issue down to its source. No, we rather go body to body with a stranger than have a heart to heart with our brothers. Rather drink a 4 for 10 than 10 to the feelings we bottle up until some misplaced comment shakes us up and we overflow with anger. That mentality is the anchor for so many men drowning. They say if you see something, say something, but good luck finding a man comfortable talking. Because what is there to say? Are we to talk about how we as men take lightly the heavy reality we carry? How we build man caves to be nurseries for our inner child? How we hold it together more than we are held? How we give consideration to everyone's feelings with no consideration given to how we felt? What is there to say? Are we to talk about how we're to be great with our hands but never master a soft touch? How by age 50, Jack and Danielle become friends with all of us? How we puff, puff past our youth away? How the 24-year-old girl that took your virginity when you was 13 made you a top shotter in school instead of a victim of rape? What is there to say? When every page of our people's story been printed by mere privilege, we inherently benefit from our forefathers' deeds. So you being molested at 13 is just a chapter people don't give a damn to read. They say if you see something, say something, but talk is cheap when issues affecting men's mental health. Be the conversation. And I know everyone's interpretation will be different. Some would argue that when a fella is man, oh, when a problem self-induced. Some would argue that for every man hanging from a ceiling fan, his hands are what tie the noose. Some would argue, y'all fellas, man, your ego is fragile, you're easily bruised. Y'all view women as tools to boost your profile, all the while oppressing the same women through the patriarchy. Now all of a sudden we is to feel sorry for men. Why? Because of a rise in suicides amongst divorcees? Nah. Y'all fellas were already happily married to your own self-interest, committed to selfish thinking, linking a mother's love to a wife's duty. Y'all fellas turn the love of your life into a second mommy. So tell me again, why we should feel sorry for little boys masquerading as grown men? They say if you see something, say something. But enough people will argue that once men start talking, they don't really seem to talk sense. And ain't that a conundrum? To be victim and source of the same problem. We know most want our SVP to our pity party, so we go at it alone, closed lip until the open casket carries the conversations we never had. Our entire life reduced to a princess paragraph in the Sunday sun. There are way too many gone too soon, and not enough talk to me when you're ready. There's a thin line between I'm fine and I finally had enough. And as men, we are taught to be tough, so we suffer in silence, muted by our own masculinity, hushing our hurt into barely heard whispers until we stop talking entirely. And that rough moment turns somebody's son into a memory, and the mother no got plan a memorial. They say if you see something, say something. But mental health is never a conversation we take serious. Not about here in the Caribbean. And I wonder why. Maybe it's because we don't tell boys that they could cry because daddy would say he would give them to cry about. God forbid your chest start to feel tight and get a panic attack. People will say, that poor Cupid, man, sometimes he's randomly start to freak out. Depression don't exist under grandparents' care. Now, you either withdrawn or weird, then we'll say, you don't need no counseling, you just need a little prayer. Refusing to entertain any doctor visits, prescribing the Holy Spirit in weekly doses until the window of opportunity for treatment closes. If you see something, say something, but it feels hopeless when no one is listening. What happens when you reach a turning point with no one to turn to? When you burn through relationship after relationship after relationship until you are burnt out. When doubt becomes your first language. What happens when you as a man can't make things happen? What then? Because mankind ain't too kind to the man that can't contribute. You got to be of use before you can have an opinion. Men don't get to put feeling over function and expect to be heard. Only women and children innately have worth. You got to put in work if you want things to work out. And we don't make the rules. We just ruled by them until we are ruined by them. They say if you see something, say something. And I wish there was a manual for manhood. I wish somebody could show me the blueprint that outlines how to build character. I wish somebody could read me the scripture that tells me how to be my own savior. Bible to me the biblical passage that explains why I'm so passive aggressive. If we are made in God's image, why do I feel more divided than divine? They say if you see something, say something. So if as men, we all say that we were fine, would you buy it? Or would you give us another reason to be quiet?
Thank you so much, Stoned with Cupid. We're going to open up now for question and answers. We have our panelists sitting and ready to take your questions. Yes, sir. Right off the bat. I'm not going to keep you back. There's a microphone that's coming to you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is, I thank Stone with Cupid for that fantastic presentation. My name is Kamal Mason. I am a former patient of the psychiatric hospital. Dr. Amal was my doctor and Dr. McCracken diagnosed me back when I was 16. I'm 33 now. No medication and doing much better. Thank God. Thank you very much. My question is, based on this legislation, I find that I'm not seeing, though, the aspect of the right to wellness in terms of my reform. Now, what I mean by saying that is that we have three brains. We have the frontal lobes, we have the heart, 33% of that is brain matter, and the stomach. The microbiome is a brain. Now, in terms of the new medications that will come about, I've taken a lot of them. I've taken lithium, I've taken Risperdal, I've taken Seroquel, I've taken a lot of them. In terms of the new medications that will deal with the body in terms of, that will be better, that will be more on a line where they will provide less or no side effects. What is the bill going to do? And I mentioned this point on brass tacks today with David Ellis. What is the bill going to do for the social aspect of actually interacting with people and you providing privileges to people where you might be a doctor who gotten a mental illness, God forbid, and you want privileges to other privileges that patients don't have. I don't have. I was a patient, and I don't have those privileges. You want those privileges. What are you doing in the bill in terms of the right to even workplace wellness? We have that legislation as well. In terms of my reform, I hope the new medications are going to come based on the process thereby. Thank you very much.
Thanks for your question. Dr. Emmanuel, you'll take it?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Right, thank you for your
You're
question.
welcome.
So, when we were discussing the rights, you would have noticed we talked about you have a right to not be experience discrimination, and that also includes within the workplace. To your point, Kamal, we recognize that there is a lot of stigma out there for people who have been diagnosed with a mental health condition, and we are saying that people have a right not to be discriminated against just by virtue of having that condition. So that there's obviously a lot of public education, and by public I mean of workplaces and employers as well, that needs to happen, and a lot of advocacy to ensure that just because someone has been diagnosed with a condition, that they are not excluded from the workplace, and that, to the term I used about having accommodations made for that person. So for example, one of the things we recognize is in Barbados, you're either at work or you're not. There's no in between. There's no gradual return. There's no, as you recover. And that's for physical health issues as well. But since we're talking about mental health, similarly, we need to have situations in which people can be given that opportunity to recover and recover gradually and return to work in the way that they are recovering. So it's not just you're either at work and 100% or you're not at work. And so all of those things need to be and will be covered in the Act. Thank you.
I see another question here.
Hi, good evening. My question
evening.
was, as we sort of move away from the admission-based approach to mental health, as we move more towards the community care kind of based mental health program or system, what does that look like for the average Barbadian? And necessarily, as I assume that's going to be something that, a role that many of the individuals in here are going to take part in or be an active member of, what does that look like for the average Barbadian? And necessarily, given the sort of cultural reference of Barbados, what challenges do you foresee us as individuals or as a community have in terms of being responsible for our own mental health care or for our neighbors' mental health care?
Well, we're already moving towards more community care now. We've made significant steps in that direction. So each polyclinic, as you would have heard, has a mental health clinic. We don't have enough resources to have the clinics every day, which is something that we would ideally like in the future to move that to every day. So we're also, coupled with that, doing a lot of mental health promotion activities so that persons will get to normalize the conversation on mental health, such as what we're doing today, so it becomes more acceptable because, yes, stigma is still a big factor. So even in the polyclinic setting where it's more acceptable for persons to come and seek mental health care, there's still some stigma there as well. So there's a lot to be done in terms of educating the public, keeping the promotion going. As I said, we have to make mental health a conversation that is normalized so that people don't feel as if this is something abnormal. Just like Stone with Cupid was saying just now, it has to become something that we accept as a normal part of everyday conversation, so you can get family members involved, get communities involved. So in the community clinics, we would encourage family members to come or persons to come and be a part of the care, involve them in our care planning, or in the hospital setting, even before they come out into community setting, if they've been admitted, there's discharge plan. You want to get family members involved, and all of that helps with what you're asking about. But as I said, the role moving in the future is to have more services move to the community setting, so it's closer so persons can access them there, so it becomes more of a normal situation for everyone.
There are two questions to the front. Can we get the microphone, please? Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I think that when we're thinking about community care, we also need to be thinking about prevention and overall promotion of mental health. So one of the things that's mentioned in our new Mental Health Act is that it's important that we promote wellness and recovery. So having more conversations within homes. So we're talking about family members talking to other family members, parents talking to children, youth talking to youth. If I may, I'd like to recognize Let's Unpack It, a youth mental health advocacy group. So having those kinds of conversations early about what good mental health care looks like is an important way to build on community mental well-being.
You're welcome. The two questions to the front. Oh, microphone is at the back. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Roshana Clark, and I have a question and a follow-up question. My question is there, I may have missed it, but is there any improvement in the bill on how vagrants can receive medical treatment? And my second question is, how can we avoid them from being cyberbullied and being the topic of discussion due to their conditions?
All right. Who's going to take that question? Dr. McCacken? I think you were volunteered.
I think that I was. When we are speaking about vagrants, we are discussing persons who are in the community, and usually we're discussing persons who are homeless, and some of whom are going to have mental health conditions. Dr. Sue just spoke about, again, having the polyclinic system where clinics are held, and we have a team of community mental health nurses. So it will be a matter of certainly encouraging those persons who are on the streets really to access mental health care. And we are obviously promoting care in the community and in the community settings. There are times, and obviously I work in the hospital, when persons do need to be brought into hospital, and we've discussed how that can happen in terms of facilitated and other admissions. Mm-hmm. But really it is then what we are doing really is identifying persons in the community and attempting to treat them in the community and keep them out of hospital. And obviously if they're treated, then we can then discuss the other issues as to why they're on the streets, and issues to do with family relationships sometimes and housing issues and things of that nature.
There was a question on cyberbullying. Who's going to take that?
Sorry, the question was on cyberbullying, generally speaking?
Which you're saying can lead to mental health challenges? Is that the context? Persons who've had because of that, right? Okay.
I mean, it's very difficult to write that into law. What we can do is to say people should not be treated in that manner, make that, in the law. But in terms of being able to identify who is putting the person up, that's where the difficulties will come. And that's for any type of cyberbullying. And that's what, that's why it's difficult even when it's in school, when, children are engaged in that. It's very hard to identify culprits, so to speak. But to your point, that type of behavior kind of keeps it the stigma around, being homeless, being on the street, and possibly having a mental health problem going. And so hopefully with public education, we will see less of that happening.
If I can as well, I think the act of that's being put on screens or whatever is often going to be a criminal act. I think if you can certainly identify the persons and be able to trace, then persons need to be, I think, prosecuted if it is that they are, affecting the rights of those persons. And I'm not sure whether or not it falls under, there is a Computer Misuse Act, and I'd like to think that if you're going to be aggressive towards someone, filming it, and then putting it up for likes and the like, then you should also face some legal consequences for that as well.
Minister Ishmael wants to make a comment. Dr. McCracken, may I borrow your microphone, please? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good night to all. I just wanted to jump in. I didn't want to jump in, but I chose to jump in on this point because I wore another hat before coming to the Ministry of Health and Wellness, and it was in the Ministry of Industry, Innovation, Science and Technology. And to pick up from where Dr. McCracken was just pointing us, there was, or there is, on the statute books in Barbados, a Computer Misuse Act as of now. But there is, going through the process, a cyber crimes bill that has been tabled in Parliament, it has been discussed in Parliament, and it will be passed eventually, that has specific sections relating to cyberbullying. So outside of the discrimination elements of this legislation, there is stronger legislation on the books proposed that will be able to address the issue of cyberbullying more specifically. And of course, the penalties for that will be a lot more effective deterrents for persons engaging in that type of activity. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Minister.
Hi, good evening. We're seeing in data that there are young children under the age of 10 that are now experiencing mental health challenges. With this current bill, are you seeking to have a designated counselor in primary level as well? Is that something that will be addressed?
Ideally, but we recognize that this is an issue where we would have to have discussions with our colleagues in the Ministry of Education as well as in the Ministry of Youth so that we can have more mental health support available widely. But you are correct that being able to have more counselors, guidance counselors, and indeed psychologists available within the school system would go a long way to addressing concerns about mental health and mental well-being, as well as just overall promoting good mental wellness, because it would provide the opportunity for more public health education. You'd be able to work with students, you'd be able to work with teachers, parents, and by extension, families. So yes, ideally that would be one of the goals in terms of expanding services at that level, but there are definitely more discussions to be had.
All right, I saw another question to the front. Romario, I'm going to come to you. Just give me a minute. There was another question at the front.
Hi, good evening. My name is Lionel, and I have just a couple questions. How does the Ministry of Health, or is there a plan to provide access for persons that are deaf or hard of hearing? How would you provide services for them through communication? What kind of communication access do you have without them being misdiagnosed? And the second question is, how can the ministry ensure that access is provided for not only deaf persons, sorry, let me step back a minute. How does the ministry ensure that access is made to make sure that there are qualified interpreters, even if you want to call them in, who will be able to interpret something accurate and to make a more deaf-friendly environment within the facility.
Okay. Right, so excellent questions, because even now we do have persons who come to clinic who have difficulty hearing, and we have to rely very much on the family members, which is not appropriate. That's not the ideal situation. We should have independent interpreters who are able, and so when we talk about procedural accommodations, that's one of the things we're saying. You have a right to have an interpreter who is there, not a family member, because you may want to have a conversation with the doctor and not want the family member present. And as it stands right now, you can't do that because we don't have a way of communicating. So that's one of the things we have written in to say that is your right to have those procedural accommodations provided by government, and that includes having an interpreter there who is independent of the person's relative.
Dr. McLaughlin, you want, Dr. Sue, you're gonna, yes, go ahead.
I was going to say that the Act says that everyone should have equal access to care, and for this is an access to care problem. And I think what it will require, because I know that there are limited persons who can interpret, and that's part of the problem, that we don't have the resources. So I know that I've had a talk already with persons about this, and there's a need for training of more persons. And I'm told that that takes many years. So I've discussed even us having a program here to start this. So it's really we have to put something in place to have a program for this, even if it means sending persons overseas, so we can have a pool of persons, because one person can't do that work. And really and truly, we only have one person who's really qualified to do it now. So as I said, that has to be a planning and a process, and we have to put those things in place to support persons, because you don't want a section of the population to be alienated or not have the same access to care. That would defeat the purpose of this act.
Dr. McLaughlin, sorry, go ahead.
And I just want to quickly say, actually, we did have that situation with someone at the hospital. It was a few years ago, and I don't know if Bonnie remembers that she actually did come in and interpreted for us. So, we did recognize the necessity for that at that time.
We have a question at the front. Minister, you want to make a comment?
Apologies for jumping in again.
No need to apologize at all.
It's technology again. And we've had this discussion, Dr. Phillips and myself, as we speak about NCDs in general, and how we provide access, affordable access to care within our healthcare delivery within the Ministry of Health and Wellness. And as the question has come up, I note that we would love to have more human resources that are trained to be able to offer sign language and other accessibility features. It's going to be difficult to get that done across the board, but I do believe that we can better utilize technology. And even as we have this conversation and we keep it in a community setting like this and a national setting, I think it's important for us to see how we can explore technology within the healthcare delivery spaces, because there are sign language apps that can be used in a clinical setting that can allow a person who is hard of hearing, hearing impaired or deaf, to be able to have technology interpret what they're trying to say, and of course interpret the other way from the caretaker to the person who is hearing impaired or deaf. So I think we need to explore not only the training for our personnel, but of course utilization, better utilization and adoption of technology within our healthcare settings. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I just want to invite those who are online. Ma'am, we're going to take your question next. Who was the person that had their hand up? Okay. And we have Janelle, and we have Kaylee. Okay, so we have quite a few questions. Just want to include those who are watching on YouTube. Good evening to you. Thank you so much for joining us here at this community conversation. We have a question. Are there any plans within this transition from an admission-focused approach to community-based approach? Will there be additional attention plans on crisis intervention care within the community?
I think that's very much what we have been focused on, entirely moving away from the hospital and that kind of centralized management and moving into the community. And as Dr. Sue had mentioned before, that process has already started where now there's a mental health clinic in each polyclinic every week. We would love to see it go to every day, but we would, that would be the ideal thing. The other thing too, to make the point that we need to move away from the psychiatrist sees everybody. Yeah? If you think of the pyramid, and I was just saying that to Janelle as well, leave the psychiatrist to see people who are high-risk suicide, severe enduring type of psychotic chronic illnesses, and free the psychiatrist up to maybe train people in terms of recognizing and managing mental health conditions before they get to the level where you need to be talking about medication and all that type of thing. So we focus a lot on the psychiatrists, but I think there's a lot more scope for counselors, people who are trained with mental health first aid, psychological first aid, peer counseling, all of that before you get to go and see the psychiatrist. And I think that will make a big difference in how we approach managing these conditions.
The other part of the question was, what about crisis teams or in-home-based clinical staff?
So, and again, if we are going to now focus on having the teams within the polyclinic systems, they are closer to the home setting versus the person being brought into hospital, whether it's psychiatric hospital or the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. So yes, the focus will be on community-based polyclinic teams managing the person at home.
Okay. All right, we have...
I just wanted to say that in the community services now, we have a team-based approach, and each team has a psychiatrist, a psychologist, a social worker, and we have our community mental health nurses. So we already kind of have teams, and those are the persons that respond to crises in the community as it is. So that exists already. We don't have a formalized, say, to call it a particular crisis intervention team, but that already exists. There's also the ACT team. Mr. Aline is here, who's one of the senior nursing officers for the community, and that ACT team deals with persons who are more at-risk individuals, and that team goes out and sees those individuals as well. So we have things already in place for managing those situations.
All right. All right, let's get to the questions. Yes, ma'am. We're going to have to come over to this side, too, because I have some hands up on this side, but go ahead, ma'am.
Hi, good evening. So my name is Coral Hollingsworth. My foundation is the Biola Foundation, which is focusing on mental health awareness. I would have also been part of the Check My Bias campaign with the psychiatric hospital. My question to the commission is with regards to the Barbados Police Service, and basically if they are going to be educated and trained in handling the different situations that they will obviously be called to, and in dealing with it accordingly, like how we unfortunately would have seen recently in the past months.
Yeah, so we actually have a senior superintendent who's part of the commission. Unfortunately, he couldn't be here tonight, but that's the whole reason, but one of the reasons why that person was part of the commission, with the recognition that there needs to be a lot of training for the police, because we rely on the police when the person needs to be involuntarily admitted in particular, and the person is at risk because of their behaviors and so on. So we really need a lot of training for first responders. And it's not just the police, it's also ambulance people. We're just talking about ambulance people, sometimes being resistant to taking somebody who is saying, oh, I don't want to come. And you're hearing people from the fire service as well. So all first responders, we really need to have further training on how do you manage someone who may be presenting in a way that is not cooperating for whatever reason. So yes, your point is well taken.
Go ahead, ma'am.
Hello? Yeah. Congratulations on the bill. I think it's a really important move. My family, we have a lived experience. My brother has schizophrenia, diagnosed about 36 years ago. So we have been in and out of the mental health system in Barbados, and thank you for everybody who has ever been involved in his care. We really appreciate it. When you talk about moving back home, Morris was able to use the occupational therapy department before COVID on a regular basis. And it has reopened in a sense, but there's no staff. And now, after many years, I would say since COVID ended, maybe 2 days a week. That was a fantastic place for my brother to go and, have something to do during the day and train and do all sorts of things. So I just want to make a plea to get that restarted, because it was extremely helpful for him and the others that use that facility as well. I have one question though, having been through the admission system and so on. Previously, a relative had to sign as well to admit somebody. Is that still the case? Because I saw in your presentation it was just 2 doctors. The relatives have been taken out of that aspect of it?
No. We can't ever take out the relative. So the relative will very much be part of it. What we've changed was that we have broadened the base in terms of which mental health professionals can be involved in that process. In the current act, it's 2 medical practitioners. We have broadened that to say one is a psychiatrist, yes, but the other one can also be psychologist, a registered psychologist, a senior community psychiatric nurse, or a nurse practitioner, because they all have the expertise, having worked in the field for years, they all have the expertise that can also inform that decision. Well, there are 2 separate things here. Facilitated admission is one thing where the relatives are involved, but then there are the emergency orders where the community mental health nurse can make that determination, and then the person is assessed for 72 hours minimum. So that remains.
No, I just wanted to point out, because you're saying relative, and remember we've replaced that. We've given the person the opportunity to name their nominated representative in advance. So the person who makes those decisions for them is not necessarily a relative anymore. It's a person that they trust who will adhere to their preferences for care if they lose the capacity to make those decisions themselves. So it may or may not be a relative. So when they're well, they choose the nominated representative. They have to make that application in writing and have it listed with the tribunal. And then if they lose the capacity, that person can then apply for them to be admitted. That person can also apply for them to be discharged if they think that the person no longer needs the admission and they disagree with the care that the doctors are giving. So there's still a person involved in the signing, as you call it, of the process, but the person does not have to be a relative. I just want to point that out.
All right, Janelle, you have a question. Go ahead.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. So I want to ask 2 questions and then make a comment. And this is to the Commission. How does the Commission begin to educate, and we started to have that conversation, the public about the mental health scope, the wide scope that's there? And I wrote down a lot of names that people are not aware of, because when I stand as a mental health consultant, but also as a mental health educator in 2 of the education spaces in Barbados, UE and BCC, and 1 overseas. And so I want to know if we're going to make provisions for licensure and certification, which I think is very important. Sue is laughing, smiling, but she knows why I feel about that. And I want to bring awareness to the fact that people don't know that in Barbados, there's only 1 mental health profession that actually does counseling before they actually go into the practice of their own mental health profession, which are my students on the left, counseling psychologists. Social workers don't get it, nurses don't get it, EMS don't get it, fire providers don't get it, and these are people that we're looking to ask to help other people, and they're engaged in their own trauma experiences, and they're expected to provide a level of care to our public that will never work. My company has the pleasure of training a lot of mental health professionals, and I put all of those people, including NAB workers, who are responsible for, 480 NAB workers are responsible for the care of dementia and Alzheimer's patients every single day. And they're not trained in mental health first aid, they're not trained in psychological first aid, and they're expected to teach the families how to take care of family members with dementia and Alzheimer's. So as we widen this bill, we have to think about the scope of who's really providing mental health care, whether it's licensure or certification. Those who know me know that I advocate for the self-care and training from that perspective. But we have to be very careful of the ask of people who are helping people with mental health care. When they went to school, they tell people Barbados has a trauma education problem. We don't go to counseling for our trauma. We go to university. So something happens to us and we go and get a degree. And these same people with the degrees are expected to provide care to the same people we're now going to put in the community, and all of these people are burnt out. Nurses are burnt out, right? We know this. They have compassion fatigue. You know, my students know that my first thing I said before you go into pre-practicum was your self-care plan. And have you finished your counseling sessions before you go to speak to people? But they only make up a small population. Social workers are also a big part of this mental health aspect, and they make up the largest population of who actually provides care to individuals, them and nurses. Yet they do not have access to their own care and training.
Thanks so much, Janelle. All right, okay, we have to get across this side, but before we get to another question, I just want to share some comments coming from the YouTube watchers, and they have said, you can utilize NGOs to assist in the training of such programs. BPW has assisted in training workers and training nurses and HCPs in domestic violence. One person said, I'm willing to be retrained in sign language to assist in this program in any way I can. Another, is training in psychiatry likely to see a shift both at the undergraduate and postgraduate level, especially in the training of family medicine practitioners in the community? Who can take that question?
I'll take it.
Okay.
Right, because I coordinate the DM psychiatry postgraduate training with UE, and we've been talking about shifting, to this person's point, the focus from, well, I should say, adding a community, yes, including community training in psychiatry as part of the program, because right now there's not that. You know, residents go between QEH and the psychiatric hospital, but we recognize, with all what we're doing here, that there is such a need to have those people in training go into the polyclinic system and rotate through there as well. So the answer short is yes, that is part of the plans.
And another question from YouTube. Just give me one sec. Dr. Joy, I'm going to come back to you. Are there any considerations for improving the mental health surveillance, particularly among and during childhood and adolescent years, beyond recording admissions of diagnosis?
Yeah. Well, again, with the new act, it lends itself very much to data collection and being able to track trends over time. And so, again, the short answer is yes, and that's all part of why we thought it necessary to have the expanded role of the Commission for just that reason, because you can track, admissions, diagnoses, period in hospital, outpatient care, who is accessing care, anonymized, of course, the reasons why people are coming, so that we know what is happening with our children and adolescents.
Dr. Sue, go ahead.
No, I just want to respond to what Janelle was saying, because I was going to say, yes, that we have provisions in there that we say that persons must be licensed, but beyond that, we've started doing some of that work already. So the psychiatric hospital has 2 programs. One is a psychological first aid program. We've trained quite a number of persons. I'm sorry that Ms. Wharton-Boyce is not here to tell you the exact number, no. And we also have our maternal and child health program, which has trained quite a number of nurses. In fact, I think 120 nurses have been trained in MH-GAP. So we are very much starting that process of training other cadres of professionals to deliver mental health care. So, yes.
All right, let's get some questions on this side. Who has the microphone?
Thank you.
Yes, go ahead.
So
My question originally, and what I wanted to speak to more specifically, is that there is a great discussion regarding mental health as a disorder. If you're presenting with a mental health disorder, the Act does speak to that very, very thoroughly and very, very clearly, and I do congratulate you on that. But mental health itself, as a separate concept, is still something that is necessary. And when you bring something from the admission-based model to a more community care model, if I'm not cognizant of what mental health is as a child, as a teenager, as an adolescent, as a parent necessarily, there's nothing that I can do to get access to that information, right? So you can build all of the walls and all of the fancy stuff that you want to build, but if I'm not cognizant, if I'm not aware, if I'm not knowledgeable of those things, then it's useless to me, right? So the same thing remains true if we look across other laws and other bills that have been passed, if we look at like domestic violence, or if we look at like marital rape and such as situations such as these, even though the law does exist, my knowledge of the law is what matters more than simply having the law there, right? So with it, when we talk about mental health, when we're talking about, you know, a child being cognizant and aware of how they're feeling, if they're being neglected by their parents, or if they're not feeling well at school, if they're being cyberbullied, or if they're not feeling well in general, my question is, when we move away from an admissions model and we're going into a community-based model, necessarily, what are the specific steps? And I don't really want to hear like sort of the general language of, you know, we promote this and there's public education this. Specific steps as to how we plan to bring about mental health change on a societal level in Barbados.
All right. Well, I'll just say this. As part of community services, a big part of our role is promotion and prevention. And we have been looking at this in a very specific way. So I just mentioned 2 programs that the Psychiatric Hospital already has running. My program is a suicide prevention program. And part of that is a school resilience program that we're trying to launch now. And I shout out Let's Unpack It again because they're my partners with this, young people leading young people. So we want to start from the schools. And I think that's the best way to achieve what you're saying because we're getting it into persons from a young age. So we're starting out by teaching them what is mental health, Module 1, stress and coping, Module 2, emotional regulation, Module 3 and 4. So we want to do this from the ground up so that we will change the society from child up. They will have better skills than some of us had. So we want to roll that out into schools. I know that Mr. Lewis is here. And he's also been talking about a program in primary schools because the one I'm doing is for secondary school levels. So I think that that is the best approach. We start with the kids, so we change the future.
Thank you, Dr. Sue. Are there any other questions on this side? Yes, sir.
Good night, everyone. My government name, the name I was given at birth, is Lucius. Many people know me as Lou the Bajan. I am here tonight as a person who kind of accidentally fall into being an advocate for mental health with young people here in the island due to me having an instance where I self-admitted myself in the mental hospital and being a content creator. I went and tell the story of it, and I have found myself in a place where I have a very unique perspective on this situation here in Barbados. So I have what is more of a comment that somewhere inside there is probably like a question, but I just want to say this more to the commission and then also to the people in Barbados that's currently watching. When it comes to mental health, there is a lot of things that needs to be done, which is admittedly, like you made a comment that this is being, since 2008, there's a lot of work been going in here. Like, y'all being here right now is y'all been in battle for a very long time, and this is some kind of light, and you're now coming to the public here and bringing, y'all have done the work, and you have a plan on terms of how to solve a lot of issues that people have been complaining about for many years. I really want to say I see the work, and I want to commend y'all for that. When it comes to mental health in this country, there's a lot of issues, but the issue that I think has the biggest holding us back the most is an issue of information. Fundamentally, there's a lot of things being done by many different people on so much different pockets here in Barbados, and so many people does not know what is happening. For example, like we are here to discuss the draft legislation. I went and did my thing. I look at the draft. Now, being young people, I verse in technology. I took Google Gemini AI to give it a distill, and it was able to read all the points. So I have, in that little short space of time, a great understanding of what y'all looking to do. And truthfully, after reading it as someone that comprehended, thanks to AI, thanks to having it available, once the people that this is directed for knows exactly what is in that legislation, trust and believe, people of Barbados will be in support of it. It is answering a lot of issues that's been at the core of society when it comes to mental health. And like, for example, something called a living will. You, in your right space of mind, can decide, if I happen to have an incident, this is how you take care of me. And then secondly, you get to choose. It could be a family member, it could be a spouse, it could be someone that is going to make the decisions in terms of when you're unable to make your own decisions, they are going to decide what's going forward. In terms of putting you in the psychiatric hospital, the threshold to do that has been skyrocketed, and there are so many things, right to information, like there's a lot of things, and it is really commendable. So my comment here, after that whole pretext, that whole preamble is, the issue of this legislation, and this is my perspective, I'm speaking here strictly from, just to clarify, this is my perspective. The issue with this legislation, I don't think is substance. The substance is there. I think it's the focus now on how do you fight in this information war. We in a society where it's all about information war. How do you break through to the people, to the man on the corner shop, to the grandmother that is, any problem is Jesus, to the people that got the children and said, I didn't have no mental health. How do we get this information out there? I think that if this commission and the people here, because the people here are people that are champions of mental health, for you to even be here on Barbados on a Wednesday to come here to talk about mental health. You've got so many people in Barbados that mental health not even real, and y'all are at a place talking about it. Right now, in this room, these are the champions of mental health here in Barbados. It's not just the commission job. It's all of our job to get the information out there for the people. So my comment is, last question, how are you going to make this very jargon, legal stuff, law information, how do you plan on taking that information and put it into bite-sized pieces to get the majority of people to understand it? Because once you have people understand what's in this legislation, they are going to support it, and with the more support, we all know, if enough people support it, things can get done. We live in a country, if people support it, a majority of things can get done, and the issues with funding and stuff like that will not evaporate, but become easier when you got people demanding, let's make this here. So how are you going to take this whole great legislation and distill it for people to understand it so that they can support it? Thank you
so much for the question.
So this is why we need persons like yourself. You said you're a content creator. We have the young persons who are here. Let's Unpack It, Healthy Caribbean Coalition. And as Dr. Sue was saying, from the ground up, so we're going into schools, and we started that with this process, and we're going to continue. We have information all into October, but we clearly need to go beyond that. Keep pushing, as you said, with the information, because it's wonderful to have a lovely act, but if nobody knows or understands what is going on, then, it's not helpful. So, so we do have those plans. We started, but it's time for us to ramp it up now that we're having these types of conversations. So thank you very much for your endorsement, by the way. Thank you.
Yes, and we have a question which has come from YouTube. Does the new bill change the receivership process?
Right, so receivership right now requires that, if somebody has to, the person has to be assessed and said not to be have the capacity. That will be replaced by the enduring power of attorney, because that's the thing. Remember when I was doing the presentation, you have enduring power of attorney when you lose capacity, and that is likely to be permanent. So you're not going to regain capacity, and I use the example of a dementia. That's something that we debated a lot about, because people, I've spoken to a couple of people in the legal profession, and the concern raised there was, what if you make an error, meaning you said somebody has lost the capacity, and then for whatever reason they've regained it. But there's a oversight there where you can go back to the tribunal and say, we need to reverse what we've just done. So I personally don't have a problem with enduring power of attorney, but that's what we want to hear from the public. What do you think about us putting that in the bill? Because that's a new thing, where you're saying, while I am going to choose this person or 2 or 3 people who I want to make decisions on my behalf if I were to lose the ability to do that. in a permanent way. So that's one of the things I really would like to hear feedback from the audience about, because it's one of the things that created a lot of discussion amongst us in the commission, and as I said, when I've spoken to some lawyers about it.
All right, Dr. Sue, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to say that, yes, I agree completely with Dr. Emmanuel. We really didn't want to use substituted decision-making anymore, where we just take a person's right away because the old receivership program, the court would be making the decisions. But we did recognize, we hope, I'm encouraging everyone out here to choose, when this comes to pass, choose your enduring power of attorney from early, because there will be a situation that might arise where you have not chosen that person, and then what happens? And that was the part where we got really stuck. And so we introduced this concept of a financial manager. So if you didn't choose someone to be your enduring power of attorney, there would be a financial manager, and it would be your nominated representative that would be applying to have a financial manager appointed on your behalf. And it cannot be the same person who's applying. Say, your nominated representative would not be your financial manager. That person would then be chosen to act as your financial manager, and that would replace the receivership provision. But as I said, the better choice to me is make your choice in advance, and I personally like that choice, because then you can be sure that the person managing your affairs is someone that you would have chosen and that you trust.
All right, we have 8 minutes and 2 questions from the audience and 2 questions from YouTube. We're going to come to you just after this question because you've had your hand up for a while, but I want this lady in the back to have an opportunity to ask her question. Can she get a microphone, please? Okay. Oh, go ahead. Sorry. How can I miss you?
Good evening. My question is, what privileges are in place to assist those whose productivity is affected by their diagnosis or they're going through that starting trial period on medications? The reason I'm asking this question is, as you know, many self-employed people really suffer with their mental health. And so they may want to get admitted, they may want to get the help, but then it's like they're stressed out because I'm the only one that's bringing in money. So what stipends, are there like a stipend in place to help self-employed people?
I think it would be the same principle if you had a physical health problem. So that's where Social Security helps you in that if you are unwell, and whether it's physical health or mental health, you should have the same benefits of being on sick leave and being able to access Social Security. And that's one of the things why we want to emphasize so much that you should have equal access, whether it's physical health or mental health, and not separate the two things as if one is more important than the other one. I think that's quite important to make that point.
And there are instances when if you don't actually have insurance, you can make representation to, let's say, the welfare department, so supported by, let's say, a letter from the doctor, so that you can perhaps have some temporary assistance while you're getting back on your feet.
All right, ma'am, go ahead, because you've had your hand up for a while. Did you get the microphone? All right, okay, I can't keep up. All right, sorry. Go ahead, ma'am.
Hello, my name is Zaria Sandyford, and I have a question. What specific measures and interventions will be put in place to support students struggling with mental health challenges, especially in schools where the stigma is deeply rooted in the culture, so as to prevent isolation, academic disengagement, and dropout? Moreover, what can we as students do to effectively help our peers who struggle with mental health issues? And a question from Davidson Griffith would be, what's currently being done to support mental health in primary schools for young children who may be struggling, especially in households where mental health isn't well understood? And are there any resources put in place at the primary level to help them cope, learn, and feel supported?
Okay, thank you for your questions. So Dr. Sue already mentioned some of the programs that are being rolled out by the psychiatric hospital to increase and promote understanding of mental health and wellness. However, the Ministry of Education also has their own programs. So, for example, there is an Office of Student Services. In fact, some of our colleagues from the Ministry of Education who work with that office are in the audience tonight. And they will say that they work very hard. Yes, let's just recognize our senior psychologist, Mrs. Juanita Bradford Wharton, who is in charge of the Office of
of Student Services at the Ministry of Education, and they are in charge of rolling out a number of initiatives to help with mental health. So I think what we're seeing here is cooperation between ministries. Yes, Ministry of Health may lead the charge, but mental health, as I think one of our other advocates tonight said, is everybody's business. So the Ministry of Education, they do run a lot of initiatives. They do send out counselors, they have social workers who go into schools to deal with issues of crisis or to run education programs as well. And that works in tandem with the work done by the psychiatric hospital. I should also mention that they also have a network of providers. So where students need additional support and it cannot be met within the education system, then they speak to our colleagues at the former Child Guidance Clinic. Dr. Sue, what's the name again? Child and Adolescent Mental Health has had a name change, and they work with other organizations who provide mental health services. So there is actually quite a network available. As with all things, they could probably do with more personnel and more resources, but there's certainly a network available at the moment where they do their best to try to address healthcare needs, mental health care needs within the student population. And then I believe Janelle was speaking about some of the resources available at community college and university. They also have their counseling psychologists, and they have their community health centers that speak to mental health. So there are a lot of feet on the ground trying to get the work done, but more resources always are needed, and also all of us just spreading word and talking more about mental health.
All right, now we only have 3 minutes left, and we have 4 questions. And I have about 3 online as well. So can you make your question as tight and as concise as possible?
Okay,
Thank
so
you.
my name is Alicia Shepherd. My comment is more so in terms of, yes, I appreciate we can have legislation, we can have rules outlining the procedures, but I think also, to me, when it comes to mental health, not everybody knows that they're going to have a break. Not everybody is willing to accept that this is what is happening. So while we can say that we want to have an enduring power of attorney and remove receivership and all those kind of things in relation to having the court intervention, I think we need to also keep it, because there will be instances where you haven't even thought about who you're going to appoint. Some people in here, for instance, death may happen at any time, but we don't have any wills. So I don't think that this is a society that really plans for things that may happen. So it may be better just to maintain some of the existing things that may be beneficial for those persons who have not had the opportunity to do so in terms of the power of attorney, the enduring power of attorney. The other thing, my comment was in relation to the community moving away from the hospital. While I can appreciate that you're going to have a team in place, I think my concern is more in terms of how is it going to be implemented practically. Because I know there are persons who may not show up for their medication, and my thing is, what is the response going to be from the medical team at the polyclinics or wherever they'll be handling?
Thank you for that question.
Okay. First one, I think I mentioned before that the financial manager is in place for the persons who have not chosen an enduring power of attorney. So I'll keep that one at that. The second question is, it depends. If a person simply does not turn up for their medication, we may call, we may visit to see what's the reason that the person has not turned up, because the person might not have turned up because something else happened, or they had a medical appointment, or they had a reasonable explanation as to why they didn't turn up. Our first response can't be that they didn't turn up for medication. Let's go in there, guns, well, all hot and heavy, we're going to admit them. No, because persons also have choice. And this whole process that we're doing is recognizing persons' rights, which includes the right to discontinue treatment if they have the mental capacity to make that decision. So some persons may not turn up because they've chosen that they don't want medication anymore. And right now, as it exists, we have to respect that. If I know that the person knows the consequences, I sit down and have a talk with them. It happens in my office all the time. And the person understands that that may result in them being admitted later. A lot of persons say to me, I will accept that risk. And I said, okay. And I have to respect their choice on it. And then they don't get medication from that point. And we see what happens after that. So it's not a matter of a person missed one appointment and we're going to go there and try and tell the person, oh, you didn't come to clinic, so it's time to go out. We don't do that, no.
All right, trying to speed up the question process. Nikwan, you have the mic, but Renway has a question as well, but pass it to him, and he will pass it back to you. Yes, sir, I am not leaving this building till they get to your second question, I assure you.
Okay. Good night. It's often said that acts of violence is perpetrated against mental health sufferers more than the general community. And when I think about laws, I think about protections. And I know that sometimes there's disclosure made and discovery made in terms of abuses against elderly persons. And I know very often the community response is always aggression and some form of violence perpetrated against the elderly person, the mental health sufferer.
Right.
I want to know what protections are built in to really protect persons with mental illness who've endured abuse. The young lady spoke earlier pertaining to cyberbullying and those protections. The minister talked about the cyberbullying, but I also know that there's some persons, when they come in to make the disclosure, a discovery is made about abuses that's happening to them that will put them in the position that they're in now. Are we looking at strengthening those pieces of legislation where when this disclosure is made or is seen within the community, that we protect our persons with mental health issues?
All right, thanks for that question. And then we go to Mishran, and who's going to take that? Dr. McLachlan said,
Well, I think...
The sensationalism around a person with a mental disorder. I once saw a person who was mentally ill, house burned down, and they made a statement pertaining to his mental health status. You don't hear asthmatic house burned down or diabetic house burned down. And I'm holding the media accountable for these type of behaviors, because then there's a lot of finger pointing, and we know our Barbadian society, the nuances of our Barbadian society when it comes to stigma, one of our biggest issues in mental health.
Okay.
So we hope that this process that we have started today and will be ongoing will speak to exactly what you're talking about, educating the public about normalizing a conversation around having a mental health disorder, normalizing talking about how to keep yourself mentally well before things get to the point where you then have to, seek help, just in the same way that you will go to your general practitioner for a checkup, and you feel very comfortable talking to people, oh, I have to go to the doctor today because of X, Y, Z. We want the same thing to happen when you are talking about mental health conditions, so that we don't have what you're talking about, sir, in terms of the stigma that is still very much out there, the ridicule that you and the other young lady at the back spoke about that people have to endure just because of a diagnosis. So yes, this is the whole point of all of this that we're doing here today.
All right, go ahead, Ms. Ron.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Miss Ron Robinson, and I'm just excited for this process. I think this is a great first step towards reducing the stigma, shattering the shame that's associated with mental health, and I'm going to be as brief as possible considering the time, as we're past 7 o'clock. Just past 8, sorry. Mm-hmm. So just two comments. I know that we don't have systems in place locally on the island regarding medical coverage for persons who are living with mental health conditions, and I just find that interesting because we have so many persons who are presenting to the psychiatric hospital who have to spend time away from work because of mental health, all types of conditions. The young lady here mentioned self-employment. I'm sure there are a number of self-employed persons who would be interested in signing up for medical coverage where insurance is concerned. And then the second comment would be regarding the nutrition of persons who are housed at the Black Rock Psychiatric Hospital. We know the relationship between the brain and the gut microbiome and the importance of nutrition, the importance of not consuming ultra-processed foods. I know Dr. Sue was in a lot of those forums recently. the importance of healthier, alternative, wholesome foods, and how some of the foods that we consume can affect our brains and how we operate. But all in all, fantastic work by Dr. McLachlan, Dr. Emmanuel as well, and the slew of medical professionals who are advancing the conversation where mental health is concerned. When I was diagnosed with a mental health condition years ago, forums like these did not exist, and I think this is really, really liberating. The gentleman here would have shared his story with bipolar disorder, and I'm just proud to say, as a Barbadian in a 2025 Barbados, we can see this advancement where the conversation is concerned, and it's just so exciting. Exciting work by Let's Unpack It Co as well.
Thanks so much. All right, I have some questions on the side. How many questions I have? Oh, here I have 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh dear. All right, listen. All right, okay. Let's make your questions as quick as possible because it is after 8 o'clock and we did start late. So ma'am, go ahead and we'll get these questions and answers in quickly.
Good night. I want to thank Dr. Rochester for that comprehensive overview of what exists in terms of the Ministry of Education and the services that we provide with regards to mental health and wellness for our children. I have Janelle. She's asking who I am. Juanita Bradford Warren, Senior Psychologist responsible for Student Support Services. My question is regards to children and their right to care. You would have mentioned that as adults, we have the right to determine whether we will accept treatment or not. However, when it comes to minor, we have a number of children, and I know Dr. Sue and I have talked on this extensively. I see our guidance counselors and social workers in primary schools who will tell you that we identify children pretty early who are having significant challenges. You can see the trajectory that will continue to happen without having intervention, proper assessment, care, etc. But then you have parents who absolutely refuse to ensure that the children get the help that they need. And we know that if the situation continues unabated, that these children are going to become significant social problems. They are likely to also have significant mental health problems. If a parent has a child who's diabetic and they refuse to get that child the insulin that they need, we all recognize it as medical neglect. But somehow we do not recognize that if a child has a mental health challenge and we don't get them the help that they need, that also is medical neglect. My question is, does the Act make provisions for ensuring that children get the help that they need?
Absolutely. I would say to you, it's already in place because I have personally been involved in a few situations where the parents, we've had to take parents to court to make the children wards of the state to ensure that they've been treated. And so I've had, well, quite a few times now to do that. So that mechanism is already in place. Obviously, it's not something we talk about because it, confidentiality, but there is already that mechanism in place that if you cannot change the parents in terms of changing their mind to get the child managed, you can involve child care services and get them to go to court, as we have done in the situations I've been involved with, to get those children treated.
Do you have a follow-up comment or question? Because we have quite a few questions.
It's not a follow-up, it's a statement.
Okay.
So there were lots of good comments made about the advocacy and so on that needs to go on in terms to make mental health and wellness something that is well understood and well ventilated in the community so we can reduce stigma. My statement has to do with budgeting. Similarly to Ministry of Health and Ministry of Education, yes, we do have resources, we do have counselors and so on in primary schools. One counselor has 6 schools. Of course, that's a large undertaking, and so we need an injection of resources in that area. But outside of the human capacity in terms of programming, we find that dealing with mental health and at-risk youth, that budgeting is always an afterthought. We are never at the forefront when we are looking at allocating funds. And if we are going to make this thing something that all across the island everybody understands and the advocacy is there, mental health and wellness from childhood to adulthood has to be at the forefront of our national budgeting plans and concerns.
All right, we have all right, yes, let's get this gentleman. Then we have 2 questions in the back. 1 question. I'm going to have to ask you to email your question in. But go ahead, sir.
God bless. Thank you very much. Really quick. In terms of a mental health day for the mental hygiene of everybody, what is the act doing for that? And very quickly for your feedback. Now, you said that in terms of even the mental health day and this lady here who made the comment before, Dr. J, said we need a conversation on Caribbean mental health. My question is, what is the act doing in relation to other Caribbean countries as they level up their mental health legislation as well, in terms of not only a mental health and mental hygiene for doctors and patients who want to have a better communicative relationship, you mentioned the disabled, but also actual legislation where euthanasia can be put in place, where if that person is killed or not, and they want to do it again, what will happen to them? They made the decision, but...
All right, well, let's just take the questions and we'll get back to the answers. I'm taking these 2 last questions. If there are any other comments, you can email them to mhlinfo@health.gov.bb, mhlinfo@health.gov.bb. We do have another conversation on Wednesday, July 30th at the Princess Margaret Secondary School, and that also starts at 6 p.m. I can only take 2 more questions. We're way over time. You don't have a mic.
Yeah, but this gentleman here was speaking for
I just wanted to say that because we have been in extensive talks with the individuals passing the bill, and we do think it's really, really important. But I just want to say that a lot of the answers to a lot of the questions here have been that stuff is already in place, or this has already been answered, or the existing bill or the existing law already answers this question. But again, nobody knows, right? So if it is the case that you have all of this in place and yet no one knows about it, there are only a half of, this entire room could fill up an entire school, and we've only filled it to half capacity. If you're not reaching the public, if you're not advocating, if you're not having budgeting for your marketing, for your advocacy, then nothing is going to change. And I just really, really feel like that point needs to be driven home. So I'm so sorry to interrupt. I really am so sorry.
All right, thank you so much. Valid point. Can we get to... Yes, go ahead.
Good night. I'm here on behalf of the Caribbean Youth Environment Network.
Thank you for coming.
It was mentioned about promoting mental health, mental wellness and recovery. And I see in the act there's a mention of the rights to live in a safe and hygienic environment, adequate sanitary conditions, and reasonable facilities for leisure and recreation. So as there's more focus on community care, is there a plan to collaborate with environmental or beautification organizations that seek to make persons' environment more comfortable, whether that be visually or dealing with temperatures or just general safety?
Yeah.
Who's going to take that question?
Okay, fine. I just want to say that dealing with mental health takes a whole of government approach. So I think everybody needs to be involved, and it has to be very much led in that way. It has to be multi-sectoral. But to answer your question specifically, we've had talks with persons about climate change, and so we recognize the effect that has. So I think what you've put there is an interesting thing, and I think that is something that we can definitely look into and do. And I think we've already been doing some of that because you recognize how important it is to have, when you're having your mental health care, you want to have it in a nice surroundings. Yeah. Even here how we set up the community conversation to look, to appeal, right? So I think that is important and definitely something that we'll be looking into.
All right, this gentleman had his hand up forever.
Yes, Watson Worrell here. Just a quick 2 questions. One of the things in the opening presentation, you mentioned about the inpatient population, and I think you were looking at the global trends as well. How concerned are you about the number of inpatients per population, and what are we doing on that front? Then the other thing is about community service, because I just want to follow on. I would think that some of that involves things like, I think the Act talks about rehab premises or places where people could be treated. So what are we talking about when we are looking at that? Are we talking about halfway houses? What are we looking at there? So I wanted to hear a little bit about that. And the minister has been doing a good job of jumping in. So I wanted to find out if there's a budget. I heard about budget, and then we stopped short of talking about the budget associated with training of staff and all those sort of, and the facilities. So I was wondering if we could get the input from the minister in terms of the budget that we would probably be seeing with this work going forward.
Thank you so much, sir, for your question. I'm afraid that's going to be our last question for the evening. I'll give the panel an opportunity to answer, but I'll say to you here in the audience and those online, your questions are important to us. Your comments are important as well. And we ask that you send your comments or questions to mhlinfo@health.gov.bb, and that email is monitored and we will get answers to your questions. So that's the last question for the evening, and Dr. McLachlan is going to answer that.
We have for a long time had concerns about, what is considered to be a large number of inpatients at the hospital. And but we've had to look at the several different factors that has caused that situation and persist in keeping that situation as it is. We are obviously always trying to get persons out of hospital, but if we're getting them out where they're going to, and that involves engaging family members, and family members are not always the most cooperative where that is concerned, and we really don't particularly like putting patients out on the street. So engaging family, supportive friends is certainly what we attempt to do. We sometimes will ask other agencies who deal with housing, etc., whether or not they can assist in providing spaces for persons to move to. And we are also looking at, again, rehabilitating those clients that are in hospital, really to get them hopefully to a point where they can manage outside. And even if they have to go and, let's say, rent a room somewhere, that they can do that and they can access, other services and foodstuffs and so on. So that's always an activity that we're engaging in. We have been having discussions about halfway house. We did have halfway houses before, and looking at how best perhaps we can do that again. So we want patients in the community. We are looking at community care for clients. So we are, trying to transition as many persons as possible out of the hospital. I hope I've answered that.
And Minister, you're going to take you'll give the final answer? I think there was a question in there for you specifically.
Yeah, I was asked to jump in this time.
Yes.
So, just to be very quick, we've allocated, I think, in this current financial year, about $236 million towards the Ministry of Health and Wellness. Approximately $38 million, David? Approximately $38 million has been allocated to the psychiatric hospital alone, which is, of course, the leading edge or the spearhead when it comes to our mental health activities in Barbados. Outside of that, there will never really ever be enough resources allocated within a small and developing state to the delivery of effective mental health care within our country. The truth is that we're going to have to do it with partnerships. I think PAHO and other organizations have really come on board to support our efforts. We have something called psychological first aid. I don't think that was mentioned today at all. It was mentioned? Okay. I heard about MHGAP, but I was not sure if I heard that part. But psychological first aid, where we train 160 persons per year. That is with assistance from the Red Cross Society. And other partners have to come on board to help us to expand the amount of training that we can do to allow our healthcare professionals and frontline workers to be better able to handle mental health situations when they encounter them and to deliver effective and efficient mental health care. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Minister. Also, thank you to the Most Honorable Kenneth George, Chief Medical Officer, Mr. Wayne Marshall, who's the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Health and Wellness, Dr. Phillips, who's the Deputy Chief Medical Officer, Mrs. Anastasia Jordan, Chief Nursing Officer, Dr. Taraline Malcolm, who's the Acting PAHO WHO Representative, the Chairman, Dr. Maisha Emmanuel, Chairman of the National Mental Health Commission, the other members of the Mental Health Commission, the Deputy Chairman, Dr. Joy Sue, senior officers of the Ministry of Health and Wellness, all of you who have been here. We could not have done this without you. Thank you so much to our technical staff, and thank you to all those members within the Ministry of Health and Wellness who are here and who have participated in making this event a reality. We have a second conversation, as I said, on Wednesday, July 30th, and that's going to be at the Princess Margaret Secondary School, and we want you to be able to come back. Please go and share with as many people as you can, and of course you can send your comments and questions to mhlinfo@health.gov.bb. And as we bring this evening's conversation to a close, we express our deepest gratitude to each and every one of you. Your courage to share your stories, your wisdom in offering insights, and your commitment to being part of this important dialogue has made this event truly meaningful. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. Have a good night, and we hope to see you again at the second conversation.